Welcome to part 4 of my message for this week, which is just as over because. If you're liking this split up into different sections, let me know. Either leave a comment or send an email to pastormitchs@gmail.com. I hope that God is being able to speak to you in a way that maybe is easier for you because you can break it up and you can listen to it over the course of the day or over the course of a few days. But I think it is important to get the word that God is trying to speak into your life. So just let me know how you're liking it so far. So in part 1, we looked at the reason or the purpose behind what God calls us to do. In part 2, we looked at what we cannot do in our walk with God. In part 3, we looked at bridging the gap between what we cannot do and what we can do. And now in part 4, I'm going to share with you guys 5 things that God calls us to do while loving other people. So those 5 things that I see in Luke 6, verses 29 through 31, those 5 things are character, choice, creativity, control, and compassion. Okay? Tried to keep it all in the C's for you, maybe making it a little bit easier for you guys to remember. So I'm going to go down and break down every one of those 5 different things as we move through in the verses. So the first half of Luke 6, verse 29, deals with the character that God calls us to have. So verse 29 says, if someone strikes you on one cheek, turn to them the other also. Right? Now this is something that we've probably all heard, but it's something that we don't take seriously. We've been taught in our society that if somebody hits you, you hit them back. If somebody punches you, you punch them harder. If somebody does something that is bad to you, then you get revenge on that person. And there's been many times when I've reacted in a way like this. But God says, don't react like that. Don't react by hitting them back. React by turning your head and saying, hit this side too. Now, what does that show? What kind of character does God call you to live with when you do this? So, if you, instead of hitting somebody back, if you turn your cheek, you're not giving them a taste of their own medicine, right? Because giving somebody a taste of their own medicine would be hitting them back, would be doing whatever they did back to you, as hard, if not harder, than what they did. So you don't give them a taste of your own medicine. Instead, when you turn your cheek, you give them a taste of their own mediocrity. And that's powerful. If somebody hits you and you say, I know you just hit me, but I'm going to go ahead and turn my other cheek. You can hit me as well. You can hit me again. Then it's showing that person that whatever they just did had no impact in your life at all. And if I were to hit somebody and then they were to say, okay, here you go, hit the other side as well, then that would make me feel horrible. That is better than giving people a taste of their own medicine. Give them a taste of their own mediocrity. That's powerful. That's the type of character that God calls us to live with. Second half of verse 29 says, if somebody takes your coat, do not stop them from taking your shirt. Okay, and I think that there are 2 different ways that we can look at this. But in order to get the first message out of what God is trying to tell to us here, then I think that a different translation tells it better. It says, if somebody takes your robe, do not withhold from them your tunic. And so this is important because it puts us in the shoes of the first century Jewish people. So a robe, back in this time, was given to somebody as like collateral for something that somebody gave you, right? It shows that you're giving them your word because it's saying, whatever you loan to me, I will give back to you before I go to sleep because you have my pajamas, right? I'm not going to sleep without my pajamas. So I'll give you back whatever it is that you loan me. That's your word. But God says, don't stop at your word. Give them your tunic as well. And a tunic back then was worn like an underwear garment. Okay? So if you give them your word, if you give them your robe, but then you also give them your tunic, if you give them your underwear, then you're not only showing your word, you're showing your priority. Because I hope that you don't just go walking around through your daily life without underwear, because that is nasty. You need underwear. That's why they make it. That's why you're supposed to wear it at all times, especially when you go out in public, right? So if you just give them your robe, then that means, okay, I'm going to go to work, I'm going to eat lunch, I'm going to go back to work, I might hang out with a few friends, get some dinner, hang out with the family. Just as long as I give you back whatever it is that you loan me before I go to sleep, I'm good. But God says, don't stop there. He says, offer them your tunic as well, because if you give them your tunic, if you give them your underwear, you can't go anywhere without your underwear. So it's saying, you know what, not only do you have my word, but I'm going to get it done now. I'm going to give you my priority. So that's the kind of choice that God calls us to have. He says, don't choose to just give your word. Choose to give your priority. Okay? And now the second way that I think that we can look at this is we can look at it as the coat as being priority. Okay? Your external priority. So if somebody strips, if somebody takes your coat from you saying, oh, I've taken what is important, right? Because it might be important to them. They might value a coat. But then God says, don't stop at your coat. Give them your tunic as well. Take off everything that is external about you that other people think is necessary. Because guess what? There's only one thing in my life that is necessary, and that is Jesus. And if I have Jesus, as long as whatever is on the outside, I can go out and buy a new coat. I can go out and buy some new underwear. You can take whatever you want from me, but you cannot take my God from me. So I will show you what is important. So God is saying, if you give them your tunic after they've taken your coat, you show them what is really important, what your priorities are. And that's the kind of choices that God calls us to have in our lives. So, verse 30, let's look at the type of creativity that God calls us to have. It says, give to everyone who asks you. Now, when you first read this, you might not see anything that's creative about it, but just stick with me, I'll explain. So, we have to look at the wording, right? Let's look at the wording again. It says, give to everyone who asks you. It doesn't say, give what they ask. It says, give to everyone who asks. And this is something that God does with us all the time. If we pray to God and we say, God, show me a sign. God, I want to see what you're trying to call and speak into my life. A lot of the times he doesn't do it in the way that we want him to do it. A lot of the times God says, no, I'm going to show you what you think is wrong and show you how I can use it to do what I'm calling you to do. So, if God does this to us, why don't we do it to other people? If God doesn't give us what we want, but instead what we don't want in order to get what we do, why don't we live the same way? God does not say, if a girl walks up to you for $1 million and asks for $1 million, then you give her $1 million. Because if somebody asked me for $1 million, I would say, girl, I do not have $1 million, but if I had $1 million, I definitely would not give it to you, because I need that money. I need that money. So God doesn't say, give what they ask. Instead, he just says, give to who asks. He doesn't say how. So if somebody asks for $1 million, you don't have to give them $1 million. But you can do things for them. You can help them. You can be there to support them. You can be behind them in order for them to achieve their $1 million goal. There are ways that you can give without providing what is asked. So that's the kind of creativity God calls us to have. I think that us as Christians should not be known for giving what is asked, but instead giving what is not asked to achieve what is. Okay, I'll say that again. We as Christians are not called to give what is asked, but to give what is not asked in order to achieve what is. So that's the type of creativity God calls us to have. Let's look at the second half of verse 30 and see the type of control God calls us to have. It says, if anyone takes what belongs to you, do not demand it back. Now, this is God telling us, do not treasure your worldly possessions. Do not treasure what is on this earth. And if we flip over to Luke 18, verses 18 through 25, we can see a very common example of this. So Luke 18, verses 18 through 25 says, a certain ruler asked Jesus, good teacher, what must I do to inherit eternal life? And Jesus replies by saying, why do you call me good? Jesus answered, no one is good except God alone. You know the commandments. Do not commit adultery, do not murder, do not steal, do not give false testimony, honor your father and mother. And the man responds by saying, all these I have kept since I was a boy. Sure you have. Okay. Verse 22. When Jesus heard this, he said to him, you still lack one thing. Sell everything you have and give it to the poor, and then you will have treasure in heaven. Then come follow me. Verse 23. When he heard this, he became very sad because he was a man of great wealth. So here we see a man who maybe he did live a perfect life. I doubt it, but maybe he did live a perfect life. Maybe he did. I don't know. I wasn't there. I didn't see it. I didn't stalk him throughout his life. He might have lived. I doubt that he did, but maybe he did. So Jesus says, okay, so you've upheld everything that I've asked, but there's still one thing. I need you to sell everything that you have, give it to the poor, and then come follow me with nothing. So this, I think, is very applicable to us now, the people who are living in the United States, because we are viewed a lot of the times as these rich people that God is talking to right here. Right? We are viewed as the people who have many things. So if somebody takes my iPhone, you better believe I'm going to go get that back. You better believe that nobody's going to take my iPhone, nobody's going to take my Beats headphones and not expect me to run after them. I'm going to run after them. Boy, I'm going to beat them up if they try and take any of that. But God says, don't worry about that. Don't worry about the things of this earth, because the things of this earth are not preparing you for what I am going to give you later. This is hard. And this is something that I need to work on with myself. I need to stop treasuring the things here on this earth and instead look to what is bigger and see what God is trying to call into my life by doing it. So verses 24 and 25, Luke 18, say, Jesus looked at him and said, how hard is it for the rich to enter the kingdom of God? Indeed, it is easier for a camel to go through the eye of a needle than for a rich man to enter the kingdom of God. So, when Jesus says this, the reason why it is hard for rich people to get into heaven is because they have a lot. And when you follow Christ in your life, it involves a complete devotion to God. God does not say, well, you can be devoted to me on Monday, on Tuesday you can be devoted to your job, on Wednesday you can be devoted to your sin, on Thursday you can be devoted to me again, and then I'll forgive you for all your sin. He said, no, if you are called, then you are going to follow me, And the only way that you can do that is by devoting yourself completely to me. So if you're rich, if you have a lot, it's hard to give away everything that you have. And that's understandable. But God says, how hard is it for you to let go of the things that you have on this earth in order for you to see what you gain in the next world? The reason why it's so easy for people who are poor is because they don't have a lot. So the things that they do have, they're able to put that in their faith in God because they know that they don't have a lot, but God will provide for them. And for people who are already rich, they've been able to provide for themselves without God. So why do they think that they need God? They've already made it without Him, but they've only made it in this world. God calls us to have control and to say, do not be worried about the things of this earth. Let's move on to verse 31, to the fifth thing that God calls us to have, which is compassion. Verse 31 says, do to others as you would have them do to you. Now this is, I know you've heard this before, because I was taught this in preschool and kindergarten. Okay? We've all heard this before. This is what we call the golden rule. We all know this. But here's the thing. The people who were the first century Jewish people that Jesus was talking to on the Sermon on the Plain, they knew it too. Jesus did not invent the golden rule. In fact, if you've been taught that, I'm about to shatter whatever you've been taught before, so I'm sorry. But in fact, this is something that is in every major religion. Now, it might not have the same words, but it has the same concept. It has the same meaning behind it. Okay? So, treat others the way you want to be treated. That is something that we see everywhere. And in fact, there are manuscripts that go back to as early as 2000 BC from the Egyptians that has the meaning of what Jesus says right here. So we view it as cliche. We view it as, oh yeah, we all know that, whatever. But so did the people who Jesus was trying to talk to. They viewed it the exact same way as we view it now. They viewed it as cliche. They used it as overused. It was over 2,000 years old to them at this point. But isn't it crazy how God can say, do all these things that are so difficult just a few verses earlier, and then He says, now do something that everybody has been taught? He views them as the same importance. He says the things that you look at as hard and the things that you look at as, yeah, I was taught that in kindergarten. He views them with the same importance. So the 5 things that God calls us to have while loving other people is He calls us to have character, He calls us to have choice, He calls us to have creativity, He calls us to have control, and last, He calls us to have compassion. I hope you guys enjoyed the message for this week. Once again, if you enjoyed it being split up, let me know. I'm pretty sure that I'm going to continue to do this for the messages from here on out. And then I'm going to continue as well to put up the full 45-minute sermon because that's good for me to practice for when I go on and have my own church. But I do understand that a lot of people are busy and a lot of people don't have 45 minutes to sit down and watch a full message. So I'm trying to do this to help you guys out. So let me know how I'm doing. If you have any other ideas or suggestions, let me know. And I'm looking forward to seeing you guys next week. Goodbye.